1 minute. 1 minute. My headphones. I forgot I was using headphones this morning, so I forgot to put them in. Hopefully the sound is okay. Good morning. It's Friday. Let me sort this out. They're all tangled. Just a minute. Right. Be a bit more prepared. Right. Should be a bit more prepared, shouldn't I? Let's see how we go with that. Okay. So, it's Friday. Woohoo! It's Woman of the Week time, my favourite time of the week. And I'm here this week to share another wonderful story from another amazing woman who I met, it'll be about 2 or 3 years ago now. And this lady is actually my business partner. We work together on a company called the Thrive Lab. We offer organisational well-being coaching and consultancy. And she is a true support and inspiration. And I hope that, I don't know what she's going to talk about today, but I'm sure there will be some words of wisdom and inspiration for us all through what she says. So I'm hoping she's going to come on. She's here. So we're going to get going. And I just always start this just giving a little bit of a background to why I'm doing this. And I think, you know, there's so many people with so many stories to share, and yet we don't often talk about them. And there's so much we can learn and support each other through our own experiences. So this really is a platform to share stories from other women who are thriving and doing amazing things. Even if that's just getting through the day, that is an amazing thing. So Jules is in the room. She sent a request to join. So I'm going to bring her on now, and we're going to have a bit of a natter. And hopefully you will enjoy listening to her. If you are joining me live, then please say hi. I may not kind of talk to you during the live because I'll be so engrossed in my conversation, but I'll try and send you a wave. And please comment on what you've got from the conversation. Okay, so I'm going to bring Jules into the room now. So, view request, go live. Wait for her to join. This is always the bit where I get a little bit nervous and wonder if it's going to work. Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Hi. I'm good. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. I'm using these headphones today, which I've not used before, so I just wanted to make sure that they were working all right. So
They
nice to
are.
see you.
And you?
I've just given you a little bit of an introduction and kind of talked about how we know each other, but would you just like to introduce yourself to anyone who may be listening now or later?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jules Roberts. I used to work in operations, and then in my early 40s qualified to become a counsellor therapist and a professional coach, and I'm now a coaching supervisor. I'm a mum of two. Set up the Thrive Lab with Amy and Alice and Durkin, and feel that we're just stepping into a new world with great people, the right time at the right place. So feeling pretty good about that part of my world.
Yeah, yeah. And I was just saying, I met you probably about 3 years ago now, it probably was 2017. And at that time, we were both going through or were coming through quite a difficult time following the death of our parents. And
Mm.
I don't know if that's something that you were going to talk about today, because we've not really discussed what you were going to talk about today. But you know, I think it was a really tough time for me, and certainly meeting you at that time was a great help and support, and really kind of helped me having you around to talk to. And I think you've got some grief counselling kind of qualification, haven't you, in your
Yeah,
bag of many
yeah,
qualifications?
yeah, yeah. I specialised at uni in grief and suicide.
Right.
um, or the survivors of suicide, or people who'd made multiple attempts to take their own lives. and worked with a great organisation as a volunteer that specialised in particularly working with survivors who had been left behind, whether it's a partner or a son or a daughter that had actually gone on to commit suicide. So grief and all of that, and complicated grief, was something that I just naturally fell into. I as much as you can enjoy, I enjoyed being able to work with people at that level.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And what was it that you wanted to bring to the table today to talk about? Because I just said to you, well, let's just talk about something about, how you've overcome some difficulty or how you've overcome some challenge in your life, and that's really the theme that I bring to every conversation is having a chat about what's been tough and what's got you through and what you've learned. So, so what was it that you wanted to talk? Was it on that theme, or was it something else?
It was. There was a couple of things that I could bring, but I think with everything that's happened at the minute with the pandemic and with the millions of loved ones that we've lost, and also with the fear and the anticipated grief and grief in general that this has caused, irrespective as to whether it was a loss of a loved one, but it's a loss nevertheless, whether it's of a job or their ability to do something, or how they've been left after COVID. But 2016 was my pandemic. I've been really blessed that this time, this period, nobody of my loved ones or my dear friends have been significantly impacted. There's been some that have not felt well, but not had what we've seen, some of the devastation that we've seen that have happened to families out there. But when I was thinking about that, I was just thinking that 2016 was my pandemic. That was my year of despair, absolute fear, no certainty whatsoever, but ended up being with huge amounts of hope and love and an acceptance for what I've been through. And I'm now coming up to 5 years on from that, and see the world very differently. So that's what I thought would be helpful, perhaps. Helpful for
Yeah,
me as well.
yeah, yeah,
Make sense.
yeah, yeah. So what happened in 2016 that led you to kind of feel so low and be struggling so
Mm.
much?
Well, in 2015, I was on my way to work and I got a really angry call from my mum in the car as I was about 10 minutes away from parking my car to say, they think I've got lung cancer. If you're interested, come round and see me. And she was really angry. And I just went, what? Bearing in mind she lives next door but one, or they did live next door but one. And and she said, okay, I've got to go. And I ended up pulling over the car, being sick at the side of the road, getting back in the car, going to work, not saying anything to anybody, coming out of work, going round and finding out that both of my aunt's cars were on the drive. And I walked in to be told, and they hadn't been able to tell me because she'd wanted to keep it a secret. And our relationship was good, but it'd never been warm or toasty. It had always just been an only child. My mum was my mum, and she loved me, and I knew she did. But she always really struggled to connect, which she didn't with my children. With my girls, she was snuggly and cuddly and kissy and all of those wonderful things. But with me, and she had very set routine and rhythm that her and dad operated by, and they used to go to bed early, and it didn't fit around. And actually, to say we lived next door but one, we saw probably once a week, if that. So she was angry with me as well as, and angry with the whole situation. So that's what happened. And she probably died, or almost died. She did die twice and they brought her back, but there was many times when she was going to die, and she survived for a year, which was amazing. And through this, my dad was very quiet. And then at the end of 2015, I went to the doctors with him because he wasn't feeling well, and my mum was just about holding on because by this point it had moved to a brain from a lung as well. And we found out within 2 weeks that my dad was also terminally ill and had also had cancer, but we'd been
Oh
focused
God.
on my mum. And his was at the point where he only lived for 7 weeks from diagnosis to death. And So having been to consultants and going into a room and having the Macmillan nurse there, I didn't understand what the concept of that was, but then realised that they only came in when it was, there wasn't a long time left. So doing it twice was just completely overwhelming. And as an only child, parents were only in their early 70s. It was a shock, an absolute shock. And just the panic of how was I going to look after two parents and how was I going to cope with two deaths and two funerals and what was the world going to be like without them.
Yeah, that must have been like a 10-ton truck coming along and slapping you in
Yeah,
the face. I mean,
yeah.
the death of one parent is tough. To have two, to be going through that again at the same time, and not only that, you've got two small children at home. And were you still working at this stage as well? Were you
I
kind of taking some
was when
time off?
No, I was working, and when I found out the diagnosis for my dad, I had to go in and resign immediately because I knew I didn't have the capacity to work out the the impending death and what that might look like and work. And the work I did was at a clinical lead at that point. So I wasn't in any headspace to be able to listen to anybody else's work because I just couldn't. I wasn't interested in
Yeah.
anybody else because I had to be able to work out what I was feeling. Um, and I think I went very numb actually, Amy. I think I went through that stage of that not believing that this was possible and that it was a nightmare and I'd wake up and everything would be fine. Um, but of course, I didn't wake up and everything wasn't fine. It just continued. And when you think it can't get any worse, it just kind of does, which was how it seemed to be. So, yeah.
And what was it that kind of got you through those days when things were getting worse and um, almost, you couldn't face, felt like you couldn't face it. You just wanted it all to be normal and to go away. What got you through those really difficult days? So I'm just mindful that, if anyone listens or sees this that is going through that, that has recently lost somebody, that is feeling that terrible kind of suffocating feeling that, how can I get up today and get through today? What got you through? What helped?
Wow, that is a really challenging question. This might sound really strange, but I fell in love with my mum. Um, so when she told me that she only felt safe when I was there and that it didn't matter who else was there, she felt safest when I was holding her hand. Um, so that was the thing. I knew I had to keep going for her
For her.
because she needed me. And actually, by her needing me, I had a purpose. I had to be strong in that moment in time because I knew there was going to be plenty of time for me to let go. But in that moment, and actually, I didn't want to waste one moment. I wanted to be with her and my dad. I wanted to spend every moment with them because, I got to the point where I'd be handing them a cup of tea and see the hand lean forward and think, oh my goodness, I must take a mental imprint of the hand because I'm never going to see that hand again at some point.
I know. What
So,
is it about hands? I'm
oh,
just reflecting on when my dad died. And he was. It's a different story. He was taken ill very quickly and became very poorly with septicemia and was in intensive care for 24, 48 hours. And there was something really moving about his hand and having my hand in his hand and his big, daddy hand that had always held onto my little girl hand and just holding onto that. And that image of that hand will stay with me forevermore. It's the hand that held mine as he walked me down the aisle. It's the hand that, reached out to hold his first grandchild. It's the hand that would he always walked really quickly, so I'd be pulled along behind him when he was. That's something really powerful about that image and that symbolism of the hand, isn't it? And I remember sitting there holding it and really kind of looking at all the cracks and the crevices and the nails and wanting to hold on to that image.
Yeah.
More than looking at his face, because he had all the tubes and, you know, it didn't look like him, but his hand was him. There was something really powerful about that. And I'm just reflecting now and thinking how hard and how, you know, how people have suffered this last year at not having that opportunity or not being able to be with their loved ones at that time. That just really, you know, must be something really difficult to bear in your grief. You know, that you weren't there, or you couldn't be there, or you could only be there virtually. That must be a really, really tough thing that people are having to experience now and to go through now.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine.
No.
I couldn't imagine.
No. And so through all of that, you know, we're now however many years later, 4 years later, you know, and obviously you've come through, or you're in a different place now than you were 4 years ago, going through the death of both parents. I mean, how soon was it between them dying?
Just 3.5 months.
Wow.
Between the two. So what was crackers was my dad died first.
Right.
And my mum was in Christie's, and I couldn't tell her initially that he died because she was so ill. And when I did tell her, the consultant was there and the nurse, and, you know, her two sisters came along, so that I wasn't on my own. And I told her, and she started shouting his name and then wanted to go to the bathroom. And by the time we got out of the bathroom, she'd forgotten he died. So after telling him about 2 or 3 times, I just thought, you know what, we're just not going to mention this again, because with a brain tumour and what was happening, it didn't need to be kept being told. You know, I think she definitely knew on a level. But it was fine. It was absolutely fine.
So that, like you said, you know, that was your year of despair, and probably the years following it, because these things, you know, don't disappear in a matter of weeks or months, do they? It takes some time to process that and to deal with that. How, and I'm just, you know, I'm mindful that we're talking about things that are really painful for a lot of people, you know, and I feel it too, sat here listening to you and sat here thinking about my own experience. You know, I've got the tears kind of welling up in my eyes, and that kind of feeling in my gut of emotional kind of discomfort and pain, and it's not easy. It's really probably one of the hardest things that we have to go through in life, isn't it? Is dealing with and coping with the loss of a loved one. With the benefit of, you know, time and hindsight and all your years spent as a counsellor and therapist and grief therapist, what are the things that helped you over the last few years, and what are the things that you now take from that experience?
Nice question. The biggest thing was that they wanted to stay. Both of them wanted to stay. Both of them had a lot of living still to do. And even the week before my mum passed, she really was fighting hard to stay longer. She didn't want to go because she wanted to stay. And knowing that gives me some comfort, because the reason she wanted to stay was because she loved us so much. And quite often she would say, "Hey, Jules, I didn't realise how lovely you were.
Oh.
You know, I had no idea how amazing you were, but oh my goodness, at least I'm finding out how amazing you are." So we used to whisper, we used to laugh, we used to sing all her songs that she loved with Johnny Mathis. We used to go to the park and go and sit outside the primary school she went to. So we had some really amazing memories. So what I was able to do was sort of bottle those memories up with her and my dad. and all the people that were involved, because it was she died in our house, she died in my arms, but it was an open house for 3 months. And everybody just used to turn up at ad hoc times. Gary was baking scones and lemon drizzle cake and whatever, and everybody was welcome, and coffee was always on.
He's a great
And
baker, your Gary, isn't he?
he is a great baker. But I look back to that time, and my goodness, there was so much laughter in that house. To say that people were dying, we made the most of every single moment. She ate what she wanted, she watched what she wanted, she said what she wanted to say. There was no filter. She loved everybody. So I look back on that time, brought things that I've never had in my relationship with my mum. And I fell in love with her, and she truly fell in love with me and worked out who was a human being, and that brings me huge joy.
Yeah.
She had the most amazing death. She had a great death. She just went to sleep, and she was surrounded by all the people that loved her, and we felt her go. And we actually sat down and had a cup of tea, and we started the story. So we talk about her most weeks. We laugh at the things that she says and did. We think about the sensible things that she said that are good for life and good for us to know, and the values that they both had, and my dad. So we see it as a positive. We're just really grateful that we had her and that we had my dad, and grateful. I would have liked more time with my dad. It wasn't long enough, but I was grateful that I had the extra time with my mum.
And that sounds, from how you described your relationship with your mum earlier on when you were talking, that sounds like a real shift, a real change in that relationship. That unfortunately only came through her having that life-limiting terminal diagnosis.
Yeah,
for
sure. If what had happened hadn't have happened, then I don't think that I would have been able to develop the depth of the relationship and love that I had. I loved her. She was my mum, but it was more than that. I could be her protector and supporter, and the person that perhaps she didn't think was going to step up or could step up, but I did it. That I'm really proud of myself, and I'm proud at how my mum and dad opened the door and allowed me to do that. And every single person, and they know who they are, from Amy and Alice, my girls, to Gary, my life partner and husband, to friends that I was able to have conversations with at the time, to my two aunties, my mum's two sisters. Everybody played a part, and even the people who supported my daughters and who supported Gary and who supported my aunts. It's a big web of lots of people that supported everybody else go through this dramatic time. But we did it.
And I think, sorry, I'm interrupting you. So you did do it, and actually you just talked about something really important there about the support of other people. There's two things that I've just kind of picked out from some of the things you said there. Was one, again, similar to kind of why I do this, is the power of story in terms of enabling healing and shared experience, and the importance of sharing stories and sharing experiences, and also the importance of support and the importance of network around you, of people to support you. And yet often when we are grieving or we're going through grief, either people are frightened to reach out because they're frightened to say the wrong thing, or they think, oh, I'll just leave them for a bit because they need to get on with their grief, where actually what you really want is just someone to talk to and tell them how awful it feels. And also, as a human being, often we've been kind of conditioned or told that you go and cry alone. We don't want to see your tears, so you kind of feel like you need to go and hide yourself to deal with your grief, or to cry alone. But when at exactly that point you need someone to kind of almost catch you as you fall or hold you in a safe place. And I think those two things you talked about there was that even now you're sharing stories about your parents, you're talking about them, you're remembering them, and that network of people that came around you and your family to support you are two really important things that have helped you over the years. Is that fair?
Oh God, yeah. I must have probably bored people silly because for me, being able to talk about it and talk about them was my way of making sense and getting it out of my head, because it wasn't safe just to be in my head because it was so immense and so big that it wouldn't have helped my mental health even more. I had to talk about it, I had to make sense of it. And thank you to all the people that were around me that allowed me to continue to do that, because that's how it works for me. And I would urge anybody, don't stop talking about it. If you want to talk about your loved ones, if you want to talk about how you miss them, how there's this big gaping hole, how amazing they were, warts and all, then talk. Find somebody who is prepared to just listen and just sit there and be there, and pass you a tissue when that tear. I've never experienced when tears just pour out of your face without you having an awareness of what's actually going on. Your body takes over and your brain just can't stop it from happening. I used to call it my leaky eyes. But, if your eyes want to leak, it's equal to the love. The grief you suffer is equal to the love that you've had and that you hold for that person that you've lost. So why wouldn't we be devastated? Why wouldn't we, fill a bowl full of tears? Our tears are the love that we had, and that's okay. But the thing about my pandemic in 2016 was to say it was a good death. She had to go. They had to go. My dad had to go. They couldn't stay, and that's okay. And I'm okay. And the way they passed and the way they were going towards that passing actually made it easier for me to cope. Because I knew that I really loved, that they didn't want to leave us, and that made a big difference.
But I think, that's so different for everybody, isn't it? All our experiences of loss are different, whether it's a sudden loss, whether it's somebody's got really ill with COVID and has died alone in hospital, whether it's this, there's a million and one ways, unfortunately, to die, and it's the only one thing that we're certain of is going to happen to us, isn't it? And we don't know when and we don't know where. And that's the scary thing about it, which makes us almost kind of deny it and not think about it and not talk about it. And I just think that death and grief, it's almost like the last taboo subject. I just don't think it's talked about enough compared to other things that are talked about in society today. And it's almost, I post things on LinkedIn and various places, and whenever I post anything about death, loss, grief, no one tends to respond. And I find that really interesting, because everybody will have experienced loss at some point in their life, and if they haven't, then they are going to, unfortunately. And yet it's the one thing that people really struggle to comment on, talk about openly, know how to respond to other people who are grieving, know what to say, worry about saying the wrong thing. There's so much that we could talk about. And grief can be complicated. Like you say, I used to work with people whose partners or loved ones had committed suicide, and all the anger and all the emotions that come with that are really complicated. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. It just is what it is for you at the time, isn't it? And getting that help and support and finding someone to talk to and sharing those stories and sharing your emotions and without judging them, that you shouldn't be feeling anger or that, it depends what kind of relationship you've had with them. If it's somebody who's abused you, you might be quite glad that they've died. And then there's all the guilt that comes with that, isn't it? It's really complicated for everybody. And, what would be your message to somebody who is going through a period of grief or heartache or loss or difficulty, which I think is really pertinent at this time in our lives where so many people have died of COVID, plus other things, because the other things don't go away. Heart disease and cancer and all those other things that affect people don't go away, and suicide and everything else. So what would you say to someone, whether that's with your kind of grief therapist's kind of lens or through your own personal lens and experience, if you could offer something to those people, what would it be?
I think grief is really personal. you have to work out a way of being able to make some sense and to start to talk about it, whether that's with somebody that you love or trust. It can be difficult in your family because everybody's experiencing their own grief, whether it's going to see a counsellor or if there's services that are being offered. For example, at Christie's, there's services if it was cancer. Don't be too hard on yourself. It could take weeks or months, or it might be something that you want to bury away and it comes back later down the road. But for me, the first 3 months, we are designed as human beings to respond the way we do. So the fact that we feel wretched, we're missing that person desperately, we can't stop thinking about that person, we're crying, we see all the films that they used to watch, and we might see somebody or hear somebody because we're so tuned in to that particular person or people that we've lost. And after 3 months, if we don't start to feel a little bit lighter, just little bits of lightness coming in, that may mean that we actually need some support. Because, you know, the funerals are really important because it gets us focused into a purpose and a job and what we got to do. And then after that, as you said, people then start to dwindle away and don't want to talk about it because they're scared of being upsetting you. And the upset is more about how I'm going to feel about you crying, not about you crying. So get a network around you. Tell them what it is that you need. Tell them that it's really helpful for you to talk about it. And if after a period of time you don't feel great, then go and seek some support and talk to somebody outside of your family who can help, or who is happy to hear all of that sense and all of the stuff that you want to talk about to help you make sense of it all and process it all. But the first 3, even to 6 months, people say, is just normal. We just miss them desperately and we replay. So don't
I
don't
remember
get it.
reading, I remember reading somewhere about some research that actually shows us changes in our brain. You know, the reason we can't concentrate, the reason we forget things, the reason that we are how we are during that time is there's actual imaging changes in our
Yeah,
brain that create
that's
that.
right.
So it is really, it's important to be kind to yourself and take the rest and take the time. So it's a necessary part of what you're going through, isn't it? And as painful and as awful as it is,
Yeah,
it can and it does pass.
yeah.
And now, 4 years on, how are you now?
Great, great. I have my moments. I think about them both every day. At some point, they zoom in and zoom out. But I just feel gratitude. I am grateful to be David and Ruth Lambert's daughter. And they will always have a space around our table. They will always have a space in our hearts. Whenever we get the opportunity and we're together, we talk about them. So they're never ever going to be forgotten. And that's exactly how it should be. And for that, I'm really grateful.
And moving forward now, moving into this new world post-COVID, where so many of us have experienced loss. And like you said at the beginning, it might not be as severe as the death of a loved one, but, loss of job, loss of just choice and freedom.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of loss over the last 18 months in one way or another. What are you excited about for the future now?
What am I excited about for the future? Oh, God, so much. When you feel that you're in the right place at the right time and you feel that everything feels aligned, that's how I feel. So I have such an excitement about the future, not only with sort of family and friends, but also around my career and the stuff that we're doing with the Thrive Lab. I don't know, it just feels very open and very anything's possible. So I don't feel there's no shackles, no harness. It's just, okay, you are who you are. You've got what you've got. Go out there and make a difference.
Lovely. I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And if anyone wants a little bit more of Jules in their life, where do they find you? How do they connect with you? If anyone has kind of listened to Jules and would like to talk to her or employ her services as a therapist or a coach or whatever other wonderful things you
I'm
do,
making it blush.
oh, how would they connect with you? Where's the best way for them to find you?
So you can find me at jules@thethrivelab.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing your story with me today.
You're
It's
very welcome.
moved me to tears, which I've blinked away, and obviously brought back some of my own reflections and thinking around the loss that I experienced in 2017 of my own father and how hard that is. But again, what we take from that and what we learn from it and what we can now kind of sit back and be grateful for, even though it was a hideous and awful experience at the time and is not something you wish had happened, but it's
Yeah,
happened. And part
yeah,
of that is that acceptance,
yeah,
and getting over that. It shouldn't have happened, and that rage and anger
yeah.
around that, the unfairness of it all and everything like that.
Yeah.
But so thank you for sharing your story so openly, and I'm just again, like I say, I'm mindful that we've touched on some things that are painful and emotionally difficult, and that if anyone is watching or watches at a later date and is struggling with these kind of things, or it triggers something for you that you find difficult to deal with, then I do encourage you to, like Jules said, reach out, find someone
Yeah.
to talk to, whether that's someone that you trust and you feel will listen to you kindly. I did the grief recovery method training, and they talk about having a heart with ears, just having someone who will listen to you with all their heart, with love and compassion, without trying to fix you or without trying to tell
Yeah.
you their story, or just someone who'll sit there with you
Yeah.
and listen to you. And whether that's someone you know or whether you reach out to a helpline, then please do that. Um, so I'll always like to finish with a piece of gratitude and appreciation. So I just want to say thank you, Jules, for coming into my life in 2017. Or 2018, whenever it was, can't quite remember. But it's a real pleasure to get to know you and now to work with you. You are a fantastic lady. You have so much wisdom and knowledge to share, and also you share it with such a big heart. So it really is a joy to know you, and thank you so much for coming and talking with me today.
Thank you. And in response to that, gratitude back to you. Um, the first telephone call we ever had, I just thought to myself, I need to be in this person's life. So thank you for allowing me to step in and be your fourth gate.
Fantastic. Yes. Yeah, the fourth gate, that refers to some genetic blueprinting I've been doing with Cheryl Chapman recently, and we've discovered that Jules is my missing gate. So it's all very cryptic. But yes, okay, well, that's all for now, and I'll be live next Friday morning at 9 a.m. I will try and be at 9 a.m. It's half term, with Wendy Snedden, I think, is coming on next week. So lovely to speak to you, and thank you for taking the time to listen today. If you come and listened in and joined in, please post a comment below if you've got anything to share from your own experience, or anything that's brought up with you for you. The idea of sharing stories is that we learn and we kind of bounce off other people's experiences, and it always brings something up for us. And I just think that's the power of the story. So thank you for sharing yours today, Jules, and I will see you soon.
You will. Bye for
Take
now.
care. Bye bye.